Coming to you live is the AutoHub show, changing automotive one show at a time with Ian and Jeff. And here we go.
Go.
Just kidding. Anyway. Whoa, this is Ian.
And this is Jeff. And that is Fred, and that is Wendy. Hello. So on our technologically begoogled show today, here from Used Car Week in sunny San Diego, which is definitely sunny. Normally I say sunny, it ain't sunny. We are here on the Used Car Week podcast stage, sponsored by our friends, Ship Your Car Now. And of course, the vice president of Lit Up Shoes isn't wearing lit up shoes today, Don Brady, but he's walking around back and forth. But we have to us special guests, my favorite people, Friendy, that is Fred Thorne, just because I have to introduce him first, because Friendy is the first part, and Wendy Reeves of BDC Angels. And let me tell you something, he may be a devil, but she's certainly an angel. If you guys could say hi, introduce yourselves, tell us about your business.
Thanks, Jeff and Ian, for having us. Do I do my signature? Say hello, Fred.
Hello, Fred.
So anyway, BDC Angels, we're here at our first used car week, and I got to tell you, the energy in the air is just amazing. Our first experience, we travel the country pretty much doing consulting and launching remote teams mostly for dealerships in the country, and we're just be excited to network and to gain knowledge for our mainly independent pre-owned dealers, and just soak it all in, I guess. And Fred?
And I used to say I carry Wendy's luggage, but now along with that, I drive an RV. So it makes me kind of like a roadie, I guess.
Oh, I got to tell you something, the story of roadies, of course, is that there's hookups with the stars. So there you go, eh? Story. We got to mention the disclaimer that the opinion shared and the word shared here are not necessarily the part of the AutoHub show staff, but in this case, I think I said it. Ian.
So, question. I mean, obviously, you go to independent dealers all the time, and obviously, setting up BDCs and working with them on process, whether it be new cars, used car sales, or service. I know we had a show earlier today. We were talking a little bit about dealers maybe charging a little more than list price for some things. What process or what, client handling techniques are you training teams remotely or in person these days?
Actually, that's a really great question, because I think that whole topic, the processes for BDCs have changed considerably since COVID. And I think that a couple of different things. First and foremost, I think that still there's a lot of hybrid models, but a BDC sells appointments, not cars, right? So our job is to be the initial point of contact, to bring value to the customer, to act as, I'm a hashtag person, people helping people. We need to definitely add more empathy to our dealings with the leads, with the customers, prospective customers, and still provide the right value, provide relative information, relative and relevant. And it's about having a conversation with the customer, I think, nowadays. I think there are people who are still trying to get them in. But customers, what do they say? No one cares how much you know until they know how much you know, right? And I think it's very important. And as a matter of fact, your great show this morning, Don brought up a really good point about how, you had people looking for cars, and people are all concerned about the bottom line and monetizing on every single transaction. And that makes them transactional when they're not bringing the value, in my opinion. It might get you a sale if you're, for whatever reason, but you want to earn these customers and everybody they know basically for life. It's a relationship, right? So I think BDCs and sales departments both have to keep that in mind. I think that's what's changed.
So what's your thought on the fact that some of these dealers, whether it be a selling dealer or a servicing dealer, after the fact, let's say a couple years later, when you have to bring them back in and maybe buy another car, what's your feeling on the best way to do it?
Well, first and foremost, obviously, when you're done working the internet leads and you get them to sold status, I mean, the BDC sells the appointment, but then ideally we'll keep retention as well by reaching out as a service BDC and keep that retention for, recommended maintenance and oil changes and everything else. But even on the sales end, we want to continue to do a lot of data mining from within the owner base and keep our customers tight and stay close with them. Don't let them drop off just because they bought the car. Whether it's specials that you're sending out, whether it's email campaigns, whether it's offering vehicle buybacks and that type of thing, early terminations on leasing, all the various campaigns that you can run from within your DMS. It's very important that you do run those with your owner base so that the customer remains loyal to you, that they remember who you are. I think a lot of times with the big turnover in sales too, there's a lot of orphan owners that the dealer doesn't send the BDC in on to maintain that relationship after the sale. And I think it's very important.
Are you experiencing any pushback from people that think it's not going to come to an end? The gravy train is not going to stop because it's on a continuous loop.
The gravy train meaning?
Well, the way things are right now, I mean, the fact that on this morning's show, there was a comment about, you don't want to buy the car? See you later. Next.
Exactly.
And
yep.
I've talked to people that say, yeah, listen, the chip problem's not going away. It's going to take 100 years. No, I'm kidding. But it's going to take 3, 4, 5 years. So I got to keep doing this because, really, I'm not getting enough cars to make the money the old way. And then, funny enough, the manufacturer's now putting ads on TV. So they know something we don't know.
They do. Yeah. And I think that, and that's one of the exciting things about our industry, why probably many of us have even considered other careers only to come right back, because there's nothing like it. The excitement, the need and the ability both at the same time to pivot when things change and to be able to pivot on a dime. We have to be adaptable and we have to keep our ear close to the ground. What's happening now, not what all the greatest, forgive me, I don't mean any disrespect or anything, but there's a lot of experts out there now. And many rose after COVID, and there's a lot of opinions, and they're all being voiced with the increase in social media and everything from Clubhouse to all the different apps. And I think we have to make sure that we're comparing apples to apples. I think demographics have something to do with it. I think, blue collar versus a white collar versus, is it a need purchase versus, people collecting vehicles, or is it somebody who needs to reestablish credit? This is an all-important week to talk about those opportunities as well. Another thing that's happening, I think, is people that were prime customers in the midst of COVID became subprime.
Yep.
Because they lost everything and their high-end banks wouldn't finance them anymore. So they had to become, and the smart dealers, not smart dealers, successful ones are those who pivoted and then offered that same empathy and everything else to the prime buyers, realizing that as some prime at that time, they were going to again return to prime customers and bring all their friends if we treated them right. Same thing now. We can't take anything for granted. We can't assume something's going to happen. COVID told us can't do that.
Here's something funny, and I'm sorry, Ian was going to say something, but I had to tap him on the arm and say, hold on, I got an idea. Here's what's going to be funny. Is a lot of people that a year ago were prime and bought that, I don't know, F-150,
yep,
King Ranch with a lift, and what the heck, let's get the trailer on there too for $162,000. Are all of a sudden going to discover this is the feeling they can't afford that $3,200 a month for that truck.
Yep.
Because their mortgage just went from to.
Yep.
So all of a sudden that circle's going to go through, and who will they remember? The person that slammed them into that truck, or the person that contacts them later and says, "I understand, because you said one thing, and then I'll let them talk." You said one thing, and that everybody. The people that used to be the high-end purchaser is now into a position of a lower end. But I don't care if you're buying a Rolls Royce or a subprime person being put to a Chrysler 200, which are great subprime cars, by the way. You want to be treated decently. And that's how you're going to do it. You get stuffed into anything, either that roller or that 200, you're going to remember it, and eventually it'll get back to them.
Yep, exactly.
Sorry, Ian, your turn.
Well, we were talking about this ironically at Used Car Week Toronto earlier on in the year. We had a panel specifically on subprime, which was live at the show. And it was really interesting because they had never had that in the Canadian market at the Used Car Week, but B, the dealers in the room were shocked at the percentage of subprime customers in the market. But the thing that was really interesting, we talked about a little bit after, is when you look at high-end newer used cars that people are getting, that's also an interesting subprime market that I think is expanding, because just because someone can afford that payment or payments in most car cases doesn't mean that their credit's perfect because they don't have interesting financial background. So as you look at not only the cars, but the lenders who are now selling cars or funding cars for $30,000-$40,000 over MSRP, when negative equity used to be an issue only on, let's say, for example, the domestic side.
Yep.
What about when a Honda comes back and it's $10,000 negative? What's that going to look like?
Or a Chrysler 200.
Exactly. Yep.
So what's your thought on that? I mean, you're doing a customer, let's say, traditionally bought a Lexus, or they bought a Volvo, or they bought a Toyota, and now they've got a different problem in 5 years when they come to trade it, which is, now I have negative equity. I've never been exposed to that before. Right?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it is, and like you say, in the past, even as a BDC, we had to assume that a subprime. I've been working with subprime customers for many, many years. I think that we all assumed with negative equity that it's because somebody really soaked them on the used car, really overcharged them, right? So the vehicle depreciated and they, bam, negative equity, and they needed a really large down payment. Well, gosh, it could go so many different ways. But again, it's going to start a vicious cycle. If they are able to, which they wouldn't be too happy about, needing a cosigner with a better credit history, like same as old subprime that needed to get out of something with negative equity. And then you're going to roll over that money anyway, and it's going to be a higher payment again. So it's going to be a vicious cycle. So I don't know. I'm not the right person to give a really great answer on that, but that's my take.
Well, yeah, the other issue is you look at car salesmen, for example, not to pick someone viciously, but some of the car salesmen working today don't remember when interest rates were 12%.
Yep.
They don't ever remember, at least
Some of them weren't even born when interest rates were 12%.
And actually, a friend of mine just bought a BMW used and was looking at financing it versus leasing, and he goes, "Oh, the interest rate on the lease is only 9.5%. Isn't that a great value?" And I'm sitting there going, "Did you think about that before you decided to tell that?" He goes, "Well, it's not that bad." I said, "What do you mean? The person's probably used to paying 1.9 on a lease, and now they're paying 9.5. I mean, it's a different conversation.
Yeah,
I think
completely.
That's going to really impact the high-end brands, which historically have had a very high lease penetration.
Yep.
Where these people are going to go into finance, because the certified used car rate, I think, on that car was 1.9%. So it seems like a little bit of a difference, but more importantly, that salesperson, they've never had to explain that to anybody.
Yep.
Like they remember 0, but they don't remember 10.
Yeah.
And that's probably going to affect lease buyouts as well for those that are in current leases.
Oh, they're going to look at, unless it's manufacturer's leases, they're going to be looking at a serious shock at the end of the lease.
Yep.
Pardon my accent, but how there, sir? You just have to give us $14,000 to get out of your Yaris right now, please.
Yeah.
So Wendy, Fred, what do your team do when you're reaching out to subprime people and you get a list, you get your dealer or whatever, they're 2 years into their subprime, it's a 7-year term, and you're going to reach out to them to find you never get asked for them to say, listen, we want to get them back into another car, do you? Never.
No.
Oh, you don't? Good.
So, oh gosh. We don't do a lot of lease buyouts, a lot of large franchise dealers. Okay. So I can't speak from experience on
That's
that,
fine.
frankly. But it's more, I think, people in just regular finance that's more, not in the 7 years. We normally go like 4 years into a 5-year loan. Is the norm, I think.
Sure.
Where you have a better chance, where you probably have a better chance of, positive equity and
but where do you think you're going to be in 2 years when people are coming up on that 4 years of that 5-year term, and they paid?
Yeah.
They literally walked in. They needed a truck, and they got a Silverado work truck for the price of a 2-wheel drive, for a price of a 4x4 crew cab. and they're 4 years into a 5-year term.
And the other consideration is people were paying a lot more for trades when the inventory shortage was
Yeah.
was more evident, right? When there was a huge shortage, and because they don't have the chips, so they're going more pre-owned. So, and also the private party acquisition, I'll be interested to watch how that goes, because they're not going to be paying top dollar and over, and everybody's not going to be running to. They're going to try. The buyers are going to try to sell the dealers their car, so they can get into something else. But yeah, it's going to be really, really interesting. I think pivotal the next year. It's just a question as to which way it's going to go.
Yeah, because you also have some of these cars, whether it be a pickup truck or a stand behind it car, where essentially some of these features just aren't available in the vehicle because there's no chip. I mean, that was kind of interesting, sort of being a fly on the wall watching this negotiation was, well, yeah, you could buy the new one, but those laser lights don't work because we got this problem. This used one, it's less money, but the interest rate's high, but at least some of the features work. And I'm sitting there going, so this is I don't know what the price on this thing was. I think it was something like around $100,000 SUV or something like that back. And it was like, so I'm paying more for a new one, but it doesn't have, well, it does have the features, they just don't work.
And coincidentally, and not because I'm a BDC trainer, but I think it all goes back to training and coaching and how we have to make sure that everybody that comes in contact with the customer, whether it's the BDC or the salespeople or the managers, that we're all consistent with what we will provide and how we will provide it, so that we can be transparent and for the customer, because there's going to be a lot of people that are still going to talk double talk whatever to get them in and do whatever. The people that are sticking to the old ways. Interesting thing, just to show you how important, like what the one hand knows what the other one is doing. We have a Chevy dealer that we work with that they can't get the cargo vans, and apparently there's a 2-year waiting list, and they have a number of them on the website, but they're all sold. And the nature of the inventory management system or whatever is that the minute they hit the DMS, they hit the inventory.
Hey, what is this 40 grand for a big white box? That's a lot of money.
It is, and it is, and they're not going to be available. So the BDC is setting the appointments. The customers are coming in. They're getting mad. So whatever it is, you have to figure it out before you bring them in your door.
Yeah.
Whether it's the batteries or whatever it is.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you bring this up. I mean, there was a dealer in our market that was selling a used Tesla, and they'd advertised that Tesla with autopilot or auto drive or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. Customer bought the car and then took delivery of it, and then he called Tesla to register it. They said, no problem, we're going to register it for you. And they took the feature off because it wasn't actually on the car. And so then they said, oh yeah, we can add that to your car. You can pay for it in the car. It's only $7,000, but we'd be happy to accept payment. And then, of course, they called the dealer, and the dealer said, well, that's not really our problem. We don't make the car. And then there's this back and forth over who's to blame.
Hey, man, it's not my fault. Yeah. What do you want me to do? I don't make them.
$7,000 problem. But the thing that's ironic is I see a lot of dealers who are stocking these Tesla cars of various types and other used electrics, but they really don't understand. And it's challenging enough to sell a car that maybe your sales team knows about or you can see. But what if you're stocking cars that are electric, for example, that you just don't know anything about? Mm-hmm. And then you make an error like, oh, yeah, I mean, the battery I thought was at 80%, and then I sold it as at 20%. So when you look at 30% of value, I mean, that's also another question as you look at cars from, say, Florida or elsewhere that were underwater as we go into the 2023. I mean, you're going to see these cars show up.
Oh, yes.
So the question is, observation.
But it reminds me of, what was it, 2010, 2011, 2012, when my old group, Amato Automotive in Milwaukee, when the ships had gone down with the Mazdas on the water. Do you remember that, the Mazda 3s?
Yeah.
And instead of saying for order outs, your car's on the water. In other words, it's en route, it's underwater.
Yeah. So I want to change gears here a little bit. What is it? What do you want? You don't have a booth here, and I know you want business, but what do you guys want to? What do you want to glean from the show? Because you guys are a show fixture almost everywhere. And before I ever met you, I was connected with you on LinkedIn, but I see you're there all the time. And what is the big thing for you to come to this?
For me, it's not only the education that I get, but I'm a person that I like to look at different perspectives. And one of my favorite quotes, Wayne Dyer, if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And I think, and that goes to mindset training as well. I think we all, like fingers on a hand, we all need to know. And again, the people helping people, we need to consider the mindset of everybody involved. And I like to learn from a vendor perspective, from a dealer perspective, from a just another random vendor employee or whatever, somebody who's not lining who's not monetizing. And honestly, we don't really come here to monetize or anything. We come here to meet people and network and see how we can help one another and support one another. Like in early 2020, a lot of these guys that are really big now, a lot of these vendors, and there'd be too many names to drop, so I'm not going to, but they were all together in clubhouse rooms in early 2020, COVID, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the guys came to my BDC practices room on Wednesdays, and they've all got great AI solutions and all type of vendor solutions now. So initially it was to meet in real life, right? To meet all these guys that we had known so well when we networked.
Yeah.
That was the big thing when we went to our first convention, which would have been what, NADA in the spring was the first one, maybe.
Digital sales,
Or
I think,
digital.
was the first sort of open one.
Okay.
2020.
But we
No.
this year.
21.
We started in spring of this year. We were
So
in.
NADA.
There was one in April, which I think was NADA,
NADA,
and then we did whatever was in Tampa in May.
Driving sales, maybe. Oh, no,
Digital dealer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And driving
So
sales,
and we basically come to each one like as many as we could for that, to network, to gain knowledge, because a lot of my independents say, okay, Wendy, what's the latest in AI, or what about this texting solution, or what about that vendor, or what about who's doing what for, and without having my own like round table or 20 group or whatever to tell the dealers all together. I want to learn things and then apply it to what I know we're kind of more of a boutique kind of thing. We kind of cater what we do to the dealership and their demographic. So what do I see, or what do I know that I know is going to help this client is what it is education. So Fred, how about you? Why do you like to come to these? Here. First thought.
Carry your new luggage.
All right. Now, whoever started that, so anybody who doesn't know, they say, Fred, what do you do? I carry her luggage. And now he says I drive her RV, but he does all her social, and he loves to network and does a lot of selfies and does Fred talks, and he's just amazing at social. So, but what do you like about these?
I'm new into this.
But not the business. Forget about
Yeah,
the business.
Fred's trying to tell everybody right now, I don't talk.
He's on to something.
What do you like?
Just meeting people,
See?
and I like to talk to people. Not this is new to me this year, but just meeting people. A lot of cool people.
Our industry is full of cool people.
I have to say that you walk around and you meet people, and the best part for me has been, and it started at NADA. I walk the 6 miles between the two halls. I walk into the main, the main hall. I don't know which one was the main. This is the bigger hall.
Yeah, the CES hall, I think.
Yeah.
And then there was the weird food court.
The weird food court. Yeah, the non-food court. It wasn't open. But I hear somebody, Jeff, and there's a lady from Spin Car, which was Impel, which was who knows, from the country, Georgia, which is like way over there in the Black Sea and all that stuff in Asia. I hear Jeff, and I look, and it's her. Comes up, gives me a big hug, and of course I'm going like, hey, this nice lady saying hello to me. And I recognized her, but wow, my favorite line there was, you aren't 4 inches tall. And it's very true, because depending how many people get on the show, they could be 4 inches tall, or they could be 4.5, or they could be 2 inches. And that's what's a great thing, is meeting all these names and faces and people that before we're here on a computer.
Yep.
Yeah, you look at Gail from driving sales, and then from NADA, lots of different people, Digital Airstrike, and a whole bunch of other companies, Poly. Really, it was about really getting together with people that maybe you hadn't seen since the last NADA, which I think was late 2019, if memory serves me. Where was the last time really people got together at scale? And I'm really interested to see how it goes in Dallas, because I don't know when the last time NADA has been in Dallas, but more importantly, it's a different venue than Vegas, which I think is interesting. But also, I think it'll be exciting just because it's not Vegas. Nothing against Vegas, but I think it's just a new place. But you travel a lot to a lot of events and travel a lot around North America. I mean, what do you think is the best city for one of these things?
Oh gosh. I'm just learning because it's our first year, and a lot of people tell me, listening to vendors and even dealership people, oh, I go for the parties, or oh, I go for this. And it's not necessarily a generational thing, but I think even that is changing. I think that honestly, I got a lot of feedback. I listen, keep my ear close to the ground, and I got to, not myself, because it's all new and it's all a whirl and I love it all. No matter where I'll go. But I think that I heard a lot of people say they were kind of Las Vegas out, and that there wasn't a great turnout compared to in the past. I hear people also, myself included, I'm almost feeling like I'm conventioned out for a minute. Although, thank goodness, there's nothing else for the rest of the year that I'm aware of anyway. Got a little bit of FOMO for a couple that kind of overlapped one another. But wherever it is, I think it's exciting at the prospect of just meeting others, people in our industry, and comparing notes and helping one another to meet whatever, challenges we have and celebrate our triumphs. And if I can throw one more thing in.
Of course.
Another exciting thing to me about the conventions, and I felt it most, where were we, honey? Was it Tampa probably? There were so many flavors of BDC there. In other words, different trainers and consultants and everything.
Oh, I thought you were talking mocha, caramel,
I'm talking service BDC to internet sales, to BDC, to hybrid BDC, to on-site, to remote, to work, to on-site work from home. So many different varieties and so many great BDC people and internet sales-minded trainers and consultants and teams that we all offer something different, because not everybody's a perfect fit for every dealer.
Yep.
And I think the opportunity, I think this is a year for BDC, especially, and look at fixed ops, how it's exploding too. And shout out to my girl, Kaylee Filio, because parts is finally on the map.
Yep.
Parts departments. That makes me really exciting, really excited. So we're finally all coming together and all giving attention to things that have been discussed for years and years. And there's a bunch of different delivery methods, and whether it's an LMS system or whether it's conferences that like everybody has, whether it's Jonathan with his Pinnacle on the East Coast, or like I know everybody are starting podcasts and such. There's so many different venues with which we can enrich our dealers' experiences. So.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up parts, because there's always that cliche, parts can you hold? But I think when you look at merchandising, and we're supposed to have a show today on merchandising, unfortunately we're here at the event, but I am going to be writing an article, and we'll do shows next year on merchandising, because when you look at examples like Harley Davidson dealers, or even some BMW dealers, or even some Porsche dealers, they get merchandising, but if you don't have inventory and you still got that overhead space, why are you not merchandising and spreading the word on your parts or your clothing, etc.? Jeff can speak a little bit to Harley, having run a Harley store, but my estimation based on people I've talked to is it's about 40% of their business. There's no reason a big BMW store like the one in Vancouver that's 200,000 square feet couldn't have a bigger boutique section. But more importantly, that they couldn't get their salespeople involved with saying, hey, you're here buying a BMW. Why don't you get the hat, the shirt, the bike, whatever it is?
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's a great example. You get the BDC, the post-sale follow-up, because let's not kid each other. Even the best salesperson is not going to call somebody back in their follow-up and say, hey, did you look at the cool shirts we got here? Or why don't you upgrade your wheels? Yes. Or somebody else calls them up. Are you happy with the car? Are you happy with the service? By the way, you can get, and here's a gift card's going to come to you for Christmas to get you a discount or something. And the Harley world, I have to tell you, we did something called a poker run. Every time somebody bought a bike, they'd go into F&I and they'd sit down. And the way that one worked was the finance manager would talk to them, would take a credit app, etc. And then while they were working on the numbers, even if it was a cash buyer, they said, let me get you the total. But meantime, come with me. They'd walk out of the office into the center of the building, the showroom, through all the bikes, past the parts. In the center was the clothing, and ring a bell. The usual, whoa, of course, which everybody likes to do now. And then they introduced them to the motor clothes. and the motor coils are up. And unfortunately, if I don't know if it's unfortunate, but in the Harley world, most motor clothes salespeople are ladies wearing the clothes, living the life. They'd walk them through. Do you have a helmet? Do you have boots? Yeah, I got a helmet. How old's your helmet? Well, my helmet is. They go through that. Then they would introduce them to service. They'd walk them over to service. That's they get the dealership walk. The salesperson's not there. Meet a service writer, talk to them, talk about service intervals, and give them a trickle charger for the battery, because the bikes tend to sit. I don't care if you're in Arizona like you two or up north where we are, bikes will sit. I mean, they don't. There's only a few people that ride them every day, all the time. Then they walk through the shop. They see how clean it is, see all the cool guys working on bikes. They go to the parts department. So you know the rule, loud pipes save lives. Yeah, let me show you these pipes. Let's do this. What are you going to do? Most people on a Harley spend an average of $3,000 outside of the bike when they buy one. Then they go back to F&I where they finish it, because by that time they should have their, hopefully, an approval and roll them. Maybe.
The one that was really interesting, and thanks for that, Jeff. The one that was really interesting was a dealership I work with in Edmonton. So they're a big truck country, much like Texas. They had a gentleman whose whole job was to sell accessories. So he had a kiosk, he had clothing that was like Hawaiian inspired or something. It was like a tiki thing. He had like a binder full of accessorized trucks, you name it. And they were averaging between $3,000 and $5,000 per truck in additional gear. But what was interesting to me was it would be car sale, pre-approval, and they'd go meet with the accessories guy. You want the lift, you want the whatever, gun rack, whatever it is. And then they would go to that accessory piece, and then they would go to service. But it was having a process. But to your point with parts, I worked with a Mitsubishi dealer in Northern California. They have the #2 Mitsubishi parts site in the U.S. Wow. I mean, it's not a big brand, obviously, probably for most people, but there was a Honda store. I'm trying to remember. It was probably about 15 years ago. They were doing the same thing. So they were just selling Honda parts at scale to anyone who wanted to buy them. And when you look at your average parts department, it's like, well, are we even selling parts to people who ordered them? I don't know. Maybe we are. Are we selling them to people who are buying cars? Yeah, sometimes. But it's not like they're really maximizing that space in the dealership. Yep. And the one that always comes to mind also is there's a gentleman who does a show where he fixes businesses. He happens to be out of Florida, Lamonis, I think is his name. And he took on a dealership in New Jersey where the guy who built the dealership used to be in the commercial residential real estate market. So he built this dealership with a movie theater and a golf course, and he stocked inventory that didn't make sense for the market. He went and he says, okay, every square foot has to make money. So it's great that you have this movie theater. It's great that you have this golf simulator, but you don't have any money to buy inventory that people in your market actually want to buy. But more importantly, when they're walking through the store, there's nothing is making you money. And I use the example of Beaverton Toyota near Portland. They have not only a cafe that's probably equal or better to Starbucks, they have a whole store there to sell everything to do with the car, whether it be your hang from the mirror air freshener to your cleaning equipment to you name it, they sell it. But they're dedicating a part of their showroom to a store for people who are either servicing their car or selling the car or buying a car. While they're waiting, they can walk around and buy stuff, and it's impulse buy items, much like at Home Depot where they have chocolate and drinks just because you happen to be there, right? If you're buying a screwdriver or a hammer, yeah, you might want, I don't know, some Kit Kats with that or whatever it is. But again, it's really thinking and taking the best practices of that Starbucks or that Whole Foods or that grocery store or IKEA and adapting it to another retail. Yep. So that's what I think is really important, especially if you have less inventory. I was in a new Hyundai store in our market, just built the store. They got one car in the showroom, brand new showroom, no other cars in the showroom. I'm in the service side of this, showing me the service side. He's got not only not enough technicians, he's got the personal collection, two of the cars, the personal collection of the owner in lift bays because he's got no technicians and he just has space, I guess. So I'm looking at this and I'm going, okay, you just built a $20 million building. You got no cars in the showroom. You got chargers that nobody charges on because there isn't any cars. And then your service drive, you're not even maximizing that because you don't have technicians to work the bays that you just built. And I'm going, interesting. But anyway.
Yeah. So what advice can you give to people coming to these shows? Dealers, suppliers, whomever they may be. Do they go to breakout sessions? Do they go to the vendors booth? Of course, the vendors want me to say they've got great swag, especially socks. But
So honestly, and you know, I would probably, gosh, I wish I need to find out how to provide feedback.
oh, the mic.
Oh, I need to learn how to provide feedback to the conventions because as a newbie, I got all kinds of it.
Well,
But
you're not a newbie. You've been to more conventions in the last 9 months than most people have been to in the last 9 years.
well, what bums me out from that perspective is there's so many things that are they're like showing at the same time. So your topic or whatever maybe have a secondary session, right? So if you miss the one because
That's
you
a
were
heck of
trying,
an idea.
yeah. And then secondly, I would say, based on my own experience, that make sure you check your agenda and print it off and look at prior to coming to the show, because once you walk through that door, I did it myself. I meant to get certain sessions. I'd run into somebody I know, oh, distracted. I'm distracted by shiny things, but I'm also
Squirrel.
distracted by smiles, you know, by
Which are
happy,
shiny
like
things.
people I really want to, yeah, right. So you totally space whatever it was that you thought you could see it. But so I would say take notes, make sure you plan out your sessions that you want to see, and then mix in the rest, sprinkle in the rest.
And do you have any thoughts, Jeff? I mean, I know you we sort of threw you into NADA this year, and we've done a few since, whether it be U.S. conferences or Canadian conferences. What's your learnings from the last few events?
There's so much. You know, it's funny. The first thing is take your swag. No. Um, I like to joke about it, but there's, you know, socks are very cool. But you're right, because there's so many things going on. And I, you know, I come to this at the moment from a different way. I used to be a dealer. I used to come here looking for what stuff can I glean, we'll call it. It's my favorite word of the day. But you're right. There's so many things. I mean, you open up your session and it's, you know, how to get more out of your BDC,
Yep.
okay, which is a great thing. But of course, you know, who's putting the session on? You know, what I like, I really like the sessions with multiple speakers. And the reason being is you're getting
Agreed.
a quasi-independent view on things.
Yep.
You know, I mean, VinQ is somebody who we very greatly respect, Danny and that team. And we were joking around, by the way, we should have him up here with the virtual goggles and do the entire thing virtual.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
But the thing is, if Danny were to put on a session by himself, you know that has to be to promote VinQ. And their thing is great. But at this show, there's got to be 5 different platforms for buying from the public. It's like if you put on a BDC show session, I'd be there, of course. But how many BDC people are there?
So here's one last thought, and I know I got to make it short, but I think that it's very important. I was watching too. We set up in front at the beginning of our convention experience, and Fred would take pictures and we'd video for the presenters that we knew, et cetera, et cetera. Now the last show, we sat in the back and we watched the crowd. So we were supporting whomever and gaining what knowledge we could. But I was watching, and what I noticed at Digital Dealer driving sales, the presenters, it was actually the BDC thing with Courtney and Brad Pasco, which was fabulous when Sales and Service BDC marry, right? She had a lot of really great knowledge. She shared who her dealership works for. You got the dealership perspective. You had from Brad the vendor perspective. But all the dealers in the room, they didn't crowd up to there at the end of the thing. There was one dealer who was very engaged with the speakers, and he was asking a lot of questions and relating what he used for certain things. And that's where all the attendees went at the end of the session.
Interesting.
They crowded to his seat. So I think we are speaking to the GMs and the people that we think are the decision makers. I think we need to present to the DPs more. I think it needs to be valid and vital information that they themselves want to take and not get secondhand from their GMs and BDMs and everybody else. I think that would be a broader, a bigger bang for their buck, let's call it, because that's what it is.
Well, you know, it's interesting too, because you mentioned that. And in the old days, the dealer 20 groups were made up of vested dealers, I'll call her invested dealers. They were there, they had their money on the table. Now it's a series of GMs, or in many cases, they're bringing GSMs or they're bringing operations or whatever. And my joke before was that, dealer'd come, they'd go to this, everybody go out for drinks and everything after, depending where they were. They got in trouble, they didn't. And then the big thing they were there was to have this company present their wares, and they came back with signed contracts. And then all the team had to go, what? And and actually the worst part was 3 weeks later they got a letter, and somebody shows up with something, and they go, what?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because the first idea I went to before the pandemic, there was a very different feel than the one this year. And the reason is you had two groups of people. You actually had three. You had international groups. We had different ones this year than you did pre-pandemic. But you also had managers, some of which showed up for the whole event to talk to different people. And some of them just showed up at the end. But to your point, who's making the call, but more importantly, do they have the information? And I think a lot of that means not only a live event, but also streaming the event, which I think Glenn is doing with one of his upcoming. Is if you can't go, you can actually pay for streaming ticket. But you got to remember that those dealer principals may have not enough time to see all the events, so they're very choosy. But what was also interesting, specifically this year, was the shift in international dealers because of what's going on in Europe, where you had a lot of Caribbean dealers that you'd never see at NADA before, which was kind of interesting. But more importantly, you had a very different mix of dealers and managers, because the dealer was looking at, do I need to send the whole team anymore? Can I just send one person? Or if it's a bigger group, maybe I send two. But also the OEM, they had a lot of people at NADA this year, which I don't generally see, looking for ideas, probably as they start firing volleys at the dealers, but to get a pulse of what's going on from a dealer perspective. But the other thing that Jeff brought up, which I think should be my final point, is that you're now looking at, let's just say years ago it was about 35,000 U.S. new car dealers. That number is now down to almost 20,000, and the reason is acquisition. So it's going to be certainly interesting in Texas to see not only how many dealers show up, but who shows up. And that's my final thought, Jeff.
Well, we're running out of time, but the question is how many of those old new car dealers are turning into used car dealers to come to Used Car Week next year? Fred and Wendy, I love visiting with you guys, and I'm so busy saying friendy that I had to think about that. Thank you very much. We appreciate your input. And I have to tell you, your input is far greater than just BDC input, and that's what I really like. You know the business, you know the people, and what we do, we're proud of what we do as the AutoHub show is we don't promote the AutoHub show, the AutoHub training. We do promote our AutoHub hats. No, but we promote the people like you guys, or you people, you nice lady, don't want to get in trouble here. But the fact is that when you know the business, you don't just know call centers, you don't just know BDCs, you don't just know variable or fixed, you know everything, and people can pick up stuff. So I thank you very much. We really appreciate you taking the time. And thank you, Ian, because I appreciate you too.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for joining us. It was a great show, and follow us anywhere you would like on your favorite podcast, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and of course on our YouTube, or subscribe to our own channel.
So
We can't get that